Welcome to another episode of the Construction Leading Edge podcast. My name is Todd DeWalt, and my goal is to provide the tools and resources to grow your leadership skills, grow your business, and grow your income. Today we're going to talk about something that's very important to leaders, especially in the construction industry. We're going to talk about how to develop a safety culture in your organization. Again, how to build a culture of safety in your construction company, because our job as leaders, I believe, is to keep people safe, give them a safe environment to work in, and there are very few industries where that's more important than in the construction industry. We're not just talking about emotional safety and making sure people go home at the end of the day feeling valued and encouraged. Frankly, we need to make sure everybody gets home safe and alive at the end of every shift. That's a big part of your job as a construction leader. So let's jump into this and talk about how to build a safety culture in your organization. First, I'll start with the definition of culture, because this is a little bit of a different approach to safety. I'm not talking about a safety program. I'm talking about a culture. So the definition of a culture is this: a blend of the values, beliefs, taboos, symbols, rituals, and myths that all companies develop over time. Whether written as a mission statement, spoken, or merely understood, a company's culture describes and governs the way that a company's owners and employees think, feel, and act. So again, a company's culture, your company has a culture. Whether you're a one-man or one-woman show or you work for a company with 10,000 employees, there is a culture, and it's a blend of the values, beliefs, rituals, and myths that your company has, and it describes and governs the way that you and your company's ownership think, feel, and act. So let's talk about a safety culture. So first of all, your company has a safety culture as well as a corporate culture, whether it's intentional or not. There are acceptable practices when it comes to safety, and there are unacceptable practices. One of the challenges is if you've been there a long time, you don't see the culture. However, imagine if I've been in a situation where coming into a new company, I've felt like I was some outsider and I've landed on a deserted island. And because I was looking at these strange rituals and culture, kind of culture shock that I had to deal with, because these people, most of these people in this organization had been there 20, 30 years, so they didn't know how the rest of the world operated, and they had a very distinct culture, but they didn't see it. And that's one of the challenges with culture, is you don't necessarily see it if you're in it all the time. A good way to find out about your culture would be to get some outsider advice, maybe talk to some new hires and see what they think. So let's talk about some practical strategies and tactics you can use to create a culture of safety. So first of all, number one, safety cannot be a priority. I want to say that again. Safety cannot be a priority in your organization. Now, that may surprise you, but the reality is most people approach a project and they have a handful of priorities. They have schedule, quality, budget, customer satisfaction, and safety. Or those are generally the big ones. The problem with priorities is that they get shifted around based on the circumstances. In other words, sometimes quality gets sacrificed for schedule, budget will be sacrificed for schedule, customer satisfaction is sacrificed because of budget, safety is often sacrificed as a result of budget needs or schedule needs. So the problem is, if you make if you make safety a priority, then you've set yourself up for failure, because a priority can be shifted. Safety has to become a value or a conviction. It has to be on the same level as family or brotherhood. It has to become a non-negotiable. You have to take safety out of the priority pool where it can be shifted around and prioritized. You have to take it out of that pool and look at it in the context of a higher level and make it a value, make it a conviction, something that is completely non-negotiable. The next thing that needs to happen is there has to be a change of mindset about who is responsible for safety. When I first started out of college, the first project I was on was it was a new construction of a college library, and we had a very strong culture of safety in the company I worked for, but the mindset was that it was the general contractors, it was our responsibility to develop the plan, communicate the plan, and enforce the plan. That it was management's job to come up with all this information, come up with the plan, and then shove it down the throat of everybody on the job site. Like it or not, here's the program. If you don't like it, you're not going to work here. We're going to kick you off the job. Hard hat, safety glasses, safety vest. You got to be tied off. Lockout, tag out, all these good things. But our mindset was that we as the project management team had to develop the plan. Maybe we thought we were the only ones capable of developing the plan, and it was our job to enforce the plan, and it was the workers' job to just do what we said. And that worked with some success, but the reality is that we're all responsible. Here's where we need to get. We need to get to the point where everybody on the job site is responsible for developing and implementing the plan. Because there's this interesting psychological response. When you demand compliance with a program, with a safety program, you often get resistance. So I'll say that again. When you demand compliance or you try to shove a safety program down someone's throat and say, let's say you have your pre-meeting before they show up, before the roofing contractor shows up to your job site, and you sit them down and say, all right, we're going to have a safety meeting, and you say things like, okay, you're going to wear your hard hat 100% of the time. You will wear safety glasses 100% of the time. You will be tied off 100% of the time. You will, required, have to, or else, those kind of things. In a lot of people, that's going to elicit a response of resistance because something's trying to be shoved down their throat. What I found to work better is instead of saying you will, and prescribing the safety measures that someone's going to take, sit them down and say, okay, here's where we need to be. We need to work safely. We need to make sure that these parameters are met. We have to be in compliance with OSHA. We want to make sure everybody goes home safe at the end of the day. We have to have a good quality product, etc. Lay out what the end goal is, and then get that person or that group involved by asking questions like, how are we going to get there? Get their involvement and get their buy-in into the program. Because if you lay out the end goal and ask questions about how are we going to get there, if they're involved with the development of the plan, then they're going to buy into that plan, and you will not have to enforce that plan nearly as much because there's a very subtle but important shift in their mind. Instead of this plan being shoved down their throat and them resisting it, now they're part of the solution, and they've developed this plan, and it's a lot easier to enforce that because they were part of the development of that program. And what you do in this process is by asking those questions, you leverage their creativity, their experience, and their energy, and you allow that to come to the table. Whereas if you go straight into prescriptive mode of saying you will do this, you shut the valve off to their creativity and their energy. So you have to change your mindset about who's responsible for safety. It's not just management's job, it's everybody's job to come up with the plan, implement the plan, and enforce the plan. Now, this next one is a game changer in my mind. I did a talk on building a safety culture about 5 years ago, and this was a game changer for me. I did some research, And this blew me away, and I think it had a pretty dramatic impact on the folks that heard this talk. There's an interesting phenomenon with regard to soldiers in battle. Major Robert Riley of the U.S. Army wrote an article about why soldiers fight. This was published in the Military Review magazine journal back in 2000. And Major Riley said this: different things motivate different individuals to fight. He's talking about soldiers, again, answering the question, why do soldiers fight? Why do they put their lives on the line? So Major Riley says, different things motivate different individuals to fight. However, researchers generally believe that 5 factors kindle and sustain a fighting spirit. 1, group cohesion. 2, unit allegiance and pride. 3, ideology and patriotism. 4, lack of alternatives. And 5, self-preservation and leadership. However, all these motivating factors tend to deteriorate after prolonged exposure to combat except one. And that one motivating factor that endures after prolonged exposure to combat is small unit cohesion. Major Riley goes on to say, the strongest motivation for enduring combat, especially for U.S. soldiers, is the bond formed among members of a squad or platoon. This cohesion is the single most important sustaining and motivating force for combat soldiers. Let me say this again. The bond formed among members of a small group, squad, or platoon is the single most important sustaining and motivating force for combat soldiers. Simply put, soldiers fight because of the other members of their small unit. Most soldiers value honor and reputation more than their lives, because life among comrades whom a soldier has failed seems lonely and worthless. So again, soldiers fight because of the other members of their small unit. Now let's translate that or extrapolate that over to the construction world. In my mind, some construction activities are not that much different than a military exercise. Not that much different than what soldiers go through. Many people that work in construction literally put their lives on the line every day. Iron workers who are hundreds of feet off the ground. There are utility workers who are in bucket trucks or climbing poles. Utility workers who are working down in the ground, down in trenches 15 to 20 feet deep, in manholes, exposed to trench collapse and gases and asphyxiation and all these things. So in my mind, this may seem a little dramatic, but in my mind, construction work is not that much different than soldiers. They're putting their lives on the line every day. And it's extremely important for people who are working together on a construction crew whose lives are literally in each other's hands. It's extremely important for them to have this small unit cohesion. So what I've found is that we need to be able to tap into this powerful dynamic of small unit cohesion on the construction site. And we need to shift our thinking when it comes to safety from, quote, I need to get home safe, to we all need to get home safe. That safety is all of our responsibility. And that sounds a little cliche, but it is an important distinction when your safety program puts the focus on make sure you get home safe, make sure you get home safe, make sure you are constantly working safely. And then that's all they're focused on. They're just focused on themselves. But if you change the dynamic and set up a culture where everyone is responsible for the safety of each other, then you have men and women who are watching out for each other. And there are some things that we can do to develop this culture and create this small unit cohesion, but I'm convinced that this is one of the things we've been missing out on when it comes to developing a safety culture. And I've seen it. I've done it. I've seen it. I've seen the power of small unit cohesion. I've seen how a small group of guys will work together. They'll watch out for each other's back. They trust each other. And not only is safety improved, productivity and profitability and worker satisfaction goes up. So it's a no-lose situation to create small unit cohesion. So your job as a leader is to support and enhance small unit cohesion. One of the most powerful things I believe you can do as a construction leader, if you have an impact on a crew who is working, whether it's in a building, in a ditch, on a power line, whatever it may be, whatever type of, or landscaping crew running lawnmowers, if there's any sort of safety component to the work that they're doing and you're leading these folks, one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader, and I believe what your job is as a leader, is to create a culture that enhances small unit cohesion. In other words, create a climate that small unit cohesion can live in, or an ecosystem where it can develop. And I believe that the small unit cohesion will develop naturally unless it is threatened or inhibited by leadership. Typically, leadership cuts the legs out from under small unit cohesion and creates this division for some reason. But I believe a leader's job is to enhance the environment, make modifications to the environment so that small unit cohesion will develop on its own. So let's talk about some practical things you can do, really practical things you can do to create the safety culture and enhance small unit cohesion, as well as change the mindset about schedule from a priority to a value. So one of the more interesting things that I've seen came out of a safety program that I went through about 15 or 18 years ago. And what that program required was that everyone take a picture of their wife, their mom, their child, their grandchild, somebody who was really important to them. Take a picture and tape that picture on the inside of their hard hat, so that every time they took their hard hat off or put their hard hat on, they looked at that picture, and it was a very powerful reminder of the need to get home safe, the need to think about that important person as they're making decisions throughout their day, because that's what it comes down to. Safety comes down to an individual making a decision. Should I go up in this lift without being tied off? Should I walk across this beam? It's only 15 feet off the ground. I've done it hundreds of times. Should I do this? It comes down to making a decision, and what we have to do is elevate the stakes of that decision from maybe I'll get hurt to let's think about what the impact of my decision has on this important person whose picture is in the hard hat. Another thing we can do is reward safe behavior on the spot. Let's get away from strictly negative reinforcement, which is get your ass off the job site, you can't work here anymore, you're fired. If you want to see a certain behavior, then you need to reward it on the spot in the form of a gift card, a t-shirt, a pat on the back, something, some sort of positive reinforcement on the spot. When you see something being done right, immediately reward that. Also, what I've seen work well is to develop a group cumulative team reward for safety. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is on a job site, for every day or every week that there are no injuries, everyone's name, the name of everyone who had been working on that job site would go into a hat. And after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, after some set period, there would be a drawing. And let's say you said, if we have 1 month of no accidents, we'll give away some football tickets. And then if we go 2 months with no accidents, everybody's name still stays in the hat. After 2 months of no accidents, then there'll be a drawing for a big screen TV, and the pot gets bigger. So what that does is that ties the safety of the entire job site to each person. So there's a direct impact on the electrician if he sees the pipe fitter doing something unsafe. because if the pipe fitter does something unsafe and gets hurt, then he wipes out that reward for everybody else on the job site. So that makes the electrician much more likely to say, hey, dude, you need to not do that, or that maybe make the electrician more likely to call the general contractor or the foreman or somebody to enforce it. So then you have this, you're creating a culture that enforces itself. Another interesting thing to do is to reward safety innovation. Get people thinking about, how can we solve this problem? One of the interesting things I saw a few years ago was doing interior remodel work in office buildings. One of the common problems was cords and hoses were just laid across the floor, to be run over by carts, cut on metal track, and causing lots of problems. So one of the people on the job site came up with this idea of a stand made of 2x4s and plywood that held the cords up about 7 or 8 feet off the ground. So instead of running cords out across the floor in the hallway, they would just throw their cords or hoses up on these at the top of these stands. So reward innovation. Have a contest on your project or in your company to say, hey, here's a problem that needs to be solved. The guy or gal that brings forth the best solution wins $50, or they get a t-shirt or something. So that taps into their creativity and gets people thinking about working safely. This one is really simple. Plan in advance. Many of the safety issues that I've seen are just frankly a lack of planning. The crew or the guy gets to a situation that they should have thought about the day before, and they get in a situation where, I don't have handrail here, or I don't have a harness, or I don't have, I should really have a face shield, but I left it at the shop today. It'll just take me a few minutes. I'll do it. So planning. The best thing you can do is ask your people, hey, what are you looking at tomorrow? What are you going to be working on next week? If you're doing excavation, how deep will you be? If you are off the ground, how high will you be? What are you going to need? And get people thinking about what they need. Again, get out of the prescribe mode as a leader and get into asking questions, and get your people in the process and in the routine of thinking about what they're going to need before they get to that point. Make it clear that safety is just a non-negotiable value. All the way back to the new hire, the interview phase. You may be thinking, well, you know what? I've got guys that have been with me for years, and I've been lax in safety, and I've done some stuff myself. They're going to think I'm a hypocrite, and I just don't know how to roll this thing out. Well, you just need to just make a hard right turn and start. Just get everybody together and say, hey guys, I care about you enough. I want to make sure you get home safe every day, so we're going to work safely. It's not just about avoiding an OSHA fine. I want to make sure that you guys make it home safely. And if they're the right kind of people, I promise they'll appreciate that. And if you do what I'm saying and get their buy-in, then it's going to go smooth. It's going to work out. But you just need to do it. You just need to pull the Band-Aid off, make the change, and do it. Here's an interesting one. To develop this small unit cohesion, I would recommend that you get the group together outside of work as a team and bring their wives and kids. If it's in the summertime, have a picnic. I've had picnics and bowling parties and Christmas parties and things like that, because what that does is it associates a family with a guy. It's really easy to see Joe or Larry come to the job every day and they're just this guy, and that's all you know. But if Larry brings his wife and his son who just graduated from Cornell University and his daughter who has 2 young children, and you get to know them, then you by knowing that Larry and Joe have families, then everybody else on that team will have a higher value, and they'll be not only just concerned about Larry and Joe, but they're going to be concerned about Larry's kids. and Larry's grandkids and Joe's wife and Joe's grandkids. It just taps into a very powerful dynamic there that it seems a little counterintuitive, but trust me, it works. Get your team together, bring the family, bring the kids, and it'll do a lot of good for you too as a leader, because it'll put faces, and you'll realize these are the people whose lives you're affecting. These are the wives and husbands and children whose lives you're affecting. It could be a little messy and a little heavy at times, but that's good. That's what you've signed up for. Have a toolbox talk, have a safety meeting, and find some gruesome videos, some videos of news reports of accidents that have happened that are relevant to the type of work you do. For example, if you do utility work and you're doing trenching, sewer lines, water lines, that sort of thing, and trench excavation is an issue, search for trench collapse videos from the news. Guarantee you'll find some. And they could be they're not going to be your typical training video, but you need to show folks what the collateral damage is. You want to see the entire community come together. You want to see fire trucks and ambulances there. You want the guys to see the wives and kids of the people trapped in the ditch standing at the top of the ditch. And you want them to see the hearse driving away from the job site, so that they understand when, in the case of a trench collapse, generally it's not a rescue, it's a recovery. We're not trying to rescue people. After a few minutes, they go into body recovery mode. And expand the reach. Spend less time trying to prescribe what they need to do, how they need to do it, what the rules are, and show them the collateral damage from an accident. Show them the collateral damage to have them think about, what would this do to your wife? What would this do to your children? What would this do to your parents? What impact is this going to have on your buddies? Imagine if you were the guy at the top of the ditch and you saw something that was wrong and you let a guy get in the ditch and he got covered up and either injured, disabled for life, or killed. How are you going to be able to look at his wife? She's going to look at you and say, why didn't you keep him out of that ditch? So expand the reach and look at the collateral damage that happens whenever there's an accident, and get people thinking differently about safety. And I guarantee that will definitely do that. Okay, so now you may be wondering, what happens if there's a violation? Because if you're operating in the real world, no matter how much you do to create this culture of safety, the reality is there may be a violation, and chances are there will be a violation. Guys are going to mess up. They're going to get in a hurry. They're going to make mistakes. There's going to be poor planning. And there's going to be a time when you have to respond to a deficiency. Hopefully it won't be an accident. And we're not talking about if somebody actually gets hurt or killed. But let's say that somebody drops the ball. And here's an example, real life example. We had a guy a few years ago. He bottom line, he got into a ditch that was about 7 feet deep. Anything over 5 feet deep should have had trench protection, and he jumped down in this ditch for a few minutes to do something, jumped back out, and unfortunately, somebody snapped a picture of it. Well, fortunately, actually, I shouldn't say unfortunately. Unfortunately for him, somebody snapped a picture of it. And in this picture, it's a beautiful close-up picture that somebody was able to get. There's the guy in the ditch, clearly with the top of the ditch over his head. And there's a guy on the excavator. And there are two other guys standing on the side of the ditch looking at what's going on. Not a trench box or shoring jack or anything in this ditch. Clear violation. Absolute life-threatening mistake. So what do we do? So here's what the process was. We made sure, in this case, By the time we found out about it, there was no life safety risk. So if there's a life safety risk, obviously you get that resolved, get the person out of the ditch, down off the lift, off the beam, whatever the case may be. And then you pull the entire group together and you talk about it. And you start by asking questions. What happened? Tell me, state the observation, and then ask questions. So the observation is, all right, dude, I've got a picture here that shows you in a ditch illegally, and I see all you guys standing around not doing anything. Tell me what happened. Is there something I'm missing? Chances are there's not, but you start by asking questions. Find out what led to this. Where was the breakdown? Did you not have the proper equipment? Did you not know? Did somebody tell you to get in that ditch without proper protection? How did you get into that situation? Talk about how do we avoid this in the future? What are we going to do next time? How are we not going to have this conversation again? What are you going to do to make sure? And in this case, we implemented some additional steps that made the crew leaders do planning, fill out a planning worksheet the day before, and we weren't so concerned about the piece of paper, but we were concerned about them going through the process and asking the question, what are you going to be doing tomorrow? How deep will you be? And do you have adequate trench protection to do that? So that they would avoid the situation where they would be at the ditch and then not have the right equipment. Now, here's where it got interesting. Because I believe that safety is a value, here's what I did. In this safety meeting, I had the guy who was in the ditch call his wife, put her on speakerphone, and I had him explain the situation to her and apologize to him for I had him apologize to his wife for putting her livelihood at risk and the livelihood of their children, because that's what he did. By jumping in that ditch, he said that whatever time he saved by doing that was more important than their lives and their livelihood, because if he were to be hurt or killed, then he was the only wage earner, and they would be without a husband, without a father, and without a provider. Then I made each of the guys on that crew call her and apologize for not having the balls to tell that guy to get out of the ditch, for not caring enough about him or her and her family to keep him from doing something stupid. Again, we're trying to tap into this small unit cohesion. I wanted it to be extremely uncomfortable for these guys. It is not acceptable for them to let somebody work unsafely. That was an absolute non-negotiable, and I wanted it to hurt every one of them. I wanted it wasn't just a day off work. I wanted them to hear it in her voice and explain to her why they didn't have the balls. They weren't man enough to tell him to get out of that ditch. So that was an unusual step, but it was pretty effective. Now, ultimately, you're going to run into some people that just do not value safety the way you do. They see it as a priority. They are old school, they're new school, they're maverick, they're cavalier, whatever the case may be. You're going to run into people, and they just don't value safety like you do. And when you make that realization, ultimately, they're just going to have to go. If you have a misalignment of values, then they're just going to have to go. And you'll have to let those people go. And that's going to have to be okay. Because those people who do not value safety, they're going to dissolve and disintegrate the small unit cohesion that you're trying to develop. And they will undermine the culture that you're trying to build. And I don't care how talented they are, how fast they work, how much money they make, they got to go. Bottom line, if you have a misalignment of values, then you've got to let those folks go. So that wraps up how to develop and how to build a culture of safety. So just to recap, 1, safety cannot be a priority. It has to be a value. It has to be on the same level as family or brotherhood. It has to be a non-negotiable. You need to change the mindset about who's responsible for developing, implementing, and enforcing the safety plan. It's not just management's job to do all that. It's everybody's job. Next, tap into the power of small unit cohesion. Make it about we all go home safe, not just I go home safe. We talked about some of the practical things you could do, including putting a picture inside your hard hat, rewarding safe behavior on the spot, and getting the group together with families outside of work to build that cohesion. And then we also talked about how to handle when there's a violation, what to do then. So that wraps up this episode about how to build a safety culture. I hope that helps you. This has been very helpful to me. So if you want to be part of a community of like-minded leaders, if you like the idea of servant-based leadership, if you want to build a company that has high customer satisfaction as well as high employee satisfaction, where people want to work and where you want to work, then I want you to join us in the community of like-minded leaders. Go to constructionleadingedge.com/nation. You'll see a green button there. Click to join. You'll have insider access to some of the things going on behind the scenes here at Construction Leading Edge, as well as opportunities to be a part of what's going on and join this community. If you're on Twitter, follow me at ConLeadEdge. That's my Twitter handle. I also have a Facebook page I set up recently. Search for Construction Leading Edge on Facebook. You'll find it there. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email, todd@constructionleadingedge.com. Well, that's it for this episode. Until next time, thanks, guys.